And Cleve and Jamil Jaffer to talk a little bit more about this. Chris, of course, is our senior transportation correspondent. Jamil is the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute at George Mason University's Scalia Law School and has an extensive cybersecurity background that includes helping construct the 2015 Cybersecurity Sharing and Protection Act in the U.S. You are key because we are talking about a company that's supposed to be responsible for cybersecurity for a lot of other companies. But, Chris, we're going to start with you this morning. Give us the nuts and bolts. What's the impact to travel this morning? What are Microsoft and CrowdStrike, which is really the company kind of at the center of this, what are they saying about the timeline to get this all resolved?
Well, you know, the implications go far beyond just travel. We're talking about banks, hospitals, airlines, railroads, 911 systems, disruptions across the country and around the world. Certainly when we're talking about flying, today is going to be nightmarishly bad for a lot of people. Already this morning, over 2,600 delayed flights in the U.S. Latest numbers about 1,200 plus cancellations. Those numbers are going to continue to grow. United, Delta, and American halted all of their flights overnight. And, you know, those poor folks who were going to take the red eye from the West Coast to the East Coast, they never left the ground. They got stranded. We're seeing cancellations continue today. In theory, American, Delta, and United are slowly restarting their operations. But basically, this CrowdStrike issue disrupted their ability for their sort of the back-end software to talk to each other. So they couldn't relay information they needed to dispatch the airplanes. If they can't dispatch the airplanes, they don't leave the gate. And in many cases, they're still sitting where they were last night, which is not what you want by this time of the day. Now, CrowdStrike is saying that they have identified the issue, that it was a single content update for Windows hosts. The company is making clear that it is not a security incident, not a cyber attack, and that there has been a fix, that it's been pushed out, that it is being implemented. Microsoft says on X that it's been working to reroute impacted traffic to alternative systems to alleviate the impact, and that it has been seeing gradual relief. If you're flying today, that gradual relief may not come until tomorrow, quite frankly.
All right. So, Jamil, so CrowdStrike is at the center of this. So I have a kind of a two-part question. What is CrowdStrike? And I know that they said it's not a cybersecurity issue per se, but it seems like there's a particular vulnerability when you have one company that is connected to so many other companies around the globe, so many industries affected.
Well, CrowdStrike obviously is a cybersecurity company. What they do is they provide endpoint security. So they provide agents that live on a computer system, whether it's a server or a laptop that you're using, a desktop that you're using. And that agent essentially looks for bad action, bad activity, threats, and attempts to block those threats. The way a traditional antivirus would, in some ways, it's an analogical to those type of things. But the challenge you point out is when you're deployed so broadly, protecting Microsoft Azure systems, protecting other folks' endpoints as well. When you have a challenge, whether it's a cause of a cyber attack or, as in this case, a content update that didn't process properly and cause problems, it can cause cascading outages, not just for the people who are direct CrowdStrike consumers, but for those that rely on other people that rely on CrowdStrike, in this case, the Microsoft Azure backends in the U.S. central zone. So that's, I think, the challenge here. And you're exactly right to identify this kind of supply chain vulnerability where one or two or three vendors have a problem. It can cause cascading outages down the road. And that's exactly what we're seeing happen here today.
Yeah. So, Chris, you talked a little bit about, what's happening in the travel industry. I know when I got in this morning, there were some minor hiccups with the 4 a.m. show that I do. A friend of mine does radio in Canada, and they can't even go live at all. What are some of the other impacts we've been hearing about?
Well, certainly media has struggled. Any system that's relying on this CrowdStrike and Microsoft interaction, potentially could be jeopardized. I was chatting with a friend who's a TV meteorologist, and he came in to do the weather, and every screen he had was blue. that blue screen of death, they like to say. So, this has been widespread. It's certainly the travel disruptions are going to make headlines because it's a great picture, and it's super frustrating for the folks that are caught in the middle of all of this. But you're talking about across industries, from hospitals to businesses to banks to emergency systems, your government systems, anything really where this interaction went askew could see disruptions today.
Jamil, because the impact is so widespread, there's a possibility that, some in Congress, some government oversight body might want to be talking to CrowdStrike to find out what went wrong and how to ensure that it doesn't happen again. If you were crafting the questions for lawmakers who were interested, what are some of the key questions you'd be asking?
Well, it's funny you should ask that question. I recently was appointed to serve on the DHS Cyber Safety Review Board, so we may, in fact, be called upon to look into this question. But, the questions that I think anybody would be inclined to ask about this is, okay, how did this happen? What caused it? How can we mitigate these things from happening in the future? Does CrowdStrike almost certainly has a robust process on the back end before they deploy an update to ensure that it's going to work on all systems. It's clearly working on Mac and Linux systems. It's not affecting anything but these Windows systems. But of course, Windows makes up a significant portion of the endpoints that they're protecting. So it's obviously causing issues. What went wrong in that process, if anything? Was it the cause of a downstream vendor to them? It doesn't look like it right now. And again, it's early days, so we don't know what we don't know. But based on what CrowdStrike itself has said, it appears it's a problem in this content part of this update that they pushed. And so how can you avoid that thing from happening again? And how do we protect other vendors from having similar issues, particularly where there's these supply chain dependencies, Microsoft on CrowdStrike and a lot of people on Microsoft and some on CrowdStrike directly.
All right. Chris Van Cleve and Jamil Jaffer, thank you so much, gentlemen.